Everybody, and welcome to the Florida Family Law Attorney Podcast, episode 19. And today we're going to have on a repeat guest, Katie Bergman. And Katie has been on our show before. She's one of our people that we like to talk to about mental health issues and how these issues arise and affect family law cases. And for those people in the audience, Katie, who didn't get to see your first episode that you were on, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So I am a licensed mental health counselor and been doing this for about 11 years now, and just providing mental health services for adults and children, and just helping people through some difficult life transitions and things like that. I've worked with kiddos as they transition through divorce, worked with women who are leaving toxic marriages, and just everybody comes in with their own story, but a variety of different mental health diagnoses.
And where are you working at now?
I am the owner of the therapy room in Panama City, Florida, and we work with kids and adults, and just all kinds of different mental health struggles and life transitions.
Well, I think today's topic is going to be an interesting one to a lot of people out there because over the last couple of years, I've just been inundated with, I'm getting a divorce from a narcissist, or my ex is a narcissist. And, I think I know what that means. I think they have a definition of what it means. But I thought it would bring a lot of clarity to have a mental health professional tell us really what does it mean to be a narcissist and, kind of define that for us. Could you kind of tell everybody out there what is a narcissist?
Yeah, so a narcissist is essentially what they're referring to as narcissistic personality disorder. And a personality disorder is characterized by a variety of different traits. And the buzzword narcissist, I think sometimes it's commonly overused because we all have traits of a narcissist at some point or another in our life. But that doesn't make somebody, a narcissist or have narcissistic personality disorder. These traits are going to look, there's this inflated sense of confidence, somebody who might have a big ego, so to speak. A lot of the times they look very charismatic. So there's a lot of different traits that will make somebody narcissistic, gaslighting being one of them. We can talk about that a little bit later. But there's a lot of different things that characterize narcissistic personality disorder, but that doesn't necessarily make somebody a diagnosed narcissist, so to speak. So, there's a variety of ways of approaching somebody who, might be genuinely diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder. And we can get into that as well, because how you approach those types of relationships are going to be very different than approaching somebody who doesn't have that.
So if you're in a relationship or you're about to get into a relationship, what are some like the telltale signs of this person might have these tendencies or might have this disorder?
Yeah. So somebody who is maybe all in very quickly, right? So somebody that says, things like you're my soulmate, or somebody who's just putting a lot of investment in the relationship very, very quickly. Those are some red flags, so to speak. Like I said, charismatic, maybe giving a lot of gifts very early on in the relationship, and just kind of an abnormal, and sometimes it might even feel really good to a person who's entering that relationship, right? It's going to look like they're paying a lot of attention to me, and this is really great. They're giving me, a lot of, like, they're seemingly really invested, which it's hard to distinguish at that point what is true investment in the relationship versus what is narcissistic personality disorder. And when somebody's all in so quickly, it's going to be something where you have to kind of take a look at this and say, is this normal, healthy relationship investment, or is this over the top and maybe not something that is really healthy? And so that's where knowing what a healthy relationship looks like, and how to navigate healthy boundaries and that type of thing is really helpful. But those are a few things that you can look out for as far as when you enter a relationship. Is this something that is genuine investment, or is this kind of over the top?
I don't know if you know the answer to this or not, but is the early buy-in, gift giving, attention giving, is that like a lure? Because I've heard people say, oh, it was beautiful in the beginning and I was getting all this attention and they lured me in. Is it an intentional part of the disorder or this mindset to try to lure the person in at the beginning? Is that what it is?
I think that's hard to say because knowing the brain of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, whether it's intentional or unintentional, I'm not really sure. But what we do know is that, the beginning of a relationship, you've got the honeymoon phase, right? And of course, it's always going to be good in the beginning. That's why you stay in the relationship. And that honeymoon phase, last, up to years truly. But when you're looking at narcissistic personality disorder and in the way that somebody's lured in, so to speak, if that's what it is, you're looking at gift giving that's, maybe over the top, right? Not like I'm gonna, get you some candy because I'm thinking of you type thing, but something that's, of maybe high monetary value or something that's maybe abnormal, expensive trips or things like that. Um, and that can give this facade of it being really good in the beginning, and maybe to this extent of course those things are, of course that's going to make it good in the beginning because these are things that are so exciting and fun and new and adventurous, and of course that's going to build that relationship and that buy into that relationship, whereas a healthy relationship, it's going to be more of a slow build, development of trust and things of that sort rather than this immediate intense connection. Narcissism, um, and the way that somebody that's in that relationship really gets hooked is that intensity of that relationship. It's not the slow build where the trust is built over a course of time. It's a really intense connection really quickly. And so that's another thing to kind of, when you're looking at the potential for that being an unhealthy relationship with someone with narcissistic personality disorder is looking at that connection. Is this a healthy attachment, or are we abandoning our responsibilities to talk on the phone for 5 hours, things like that? That's going to be something, where that connection is maybe, too intense and we're not able to really reel back and look at, okay, this is, we're abandoning our responsibilities to get to the relationship part and being able to fulfill whatever the desire is in that moment.
So after the honeymoon phase and the attention, what's kind of the next step in the relationship if you're in a relationship with a narcissist? How does the behavior of the narcissist change?
What you're going to notice is these kind of slow signals. You're going to start to notice that that is wearing off, right? And what a lot of the time it's going to look like, just criticism, and what may feel like sometimes even plausible criticism, just somebody saying something about something you did, or sorry, let me back up. The person with narcissistic personality disorder might criticize something you did where it could be true, or maybe it's just something that you could, is a critique about yourself, but also maybe comes off as harsh or can make you feel inadequate. So I'm trying to think of an example, but really can be anything.
Is the goal to make you feel inadequate so they feel better about them?
So those criticisms are really a part of knocking down your self-esteem kind of methodically and chipping away at that sense of self. And what we see time and time again with people in these relationships is that they've had these criticisms over the course of time, and it's really chipped away at their self-esteem and starts to really make them question their sense of reality. So somebody who's been, just kind of over and over again criticized, their self-worth is going to be really low because they're going to start to believe that that's true. And that's where that gaslighting comes in. And gaslighting is essentially when somebody says something, about somebody else and it's not true, but really makes them question, like, am I that doing what they're saying I'm doing?
If
And
you
so they
keep
start to.
yeah, keep repeating the criticism or they keep repeating this view until you start to think it's reality, right?
Yeah, yeah, essentially. And really that's gonna really take a toll on people's self-confidence and their ability to see things for what they are.
Now, when you're going through this relationship and you're being gaslit and you're being critiqued and criticized and having your self esteem kind of pummeled over time, it's my understanding, and I could be wrong. That's why I'm here today, is to learn like everybody else, hopefully, get some good information. It appears that a lot of people have trouble leaving the relationship, even though this is what that's going on and it's detrimental to their self esteem. And can you Can you explain kind of the partner who's the partnered up with the narcissist, the other spouse or the boyfriend or girlfriend? Why has it become so hard for them to leave, or what's going through their head to some degree?
Yeah. So people that are stuck in this cycle, they often, are experiencing where the good parts of the relationship or things within the relationship, say affection or attention, they're being withheld, whether it's, with intent or not. I'm not really, I can't live in the brain of the narcissist to figure that out, but that part of the relationship is being withheld. And then at the same time, you get, there will be this instance where it's no longer withheld, and it's a surge of all of the feel good chemicals, dopamine and oxytocin, and it becomes this pattern where it's withheld, but then you get this surge of dopamine, and it keeps somebody in that cycle. And so it creates this trauma bond, is what we call it, where you're essentially being breadcrumbed. You're getting these little bits of what you're looking for in the relationship. So it's this facade that it's actually a good relationship because you're getting little bits of it. And when you get those little bits of it, it's all of those feel good chemicals, and it becomes this pattern over the course of time.
So you basically are kind of chasing the next brain chemistry high, but you're
Mhm.
not getting it. You're getting put down. You're getting your self esteem pummeled. And then you get that attaboy or that affection. And then the brain releases the chemicals that make you feel like you're Superman and
Exactly.
everything is great. And you just are chasing the next positive reinforcement, but you're struggling through all the negative to get there.
Exactly. It becomes this pattern of reinforcement, essentially. The same way that you would, this is going to sound kind of bad, but truly, training a dog, right? It's positive reinforcement. They get the treat, so to speak, and it becomes this kind of trained or learned behavior of, I know this is, there's this good instance, even if all of these other things are really bad and not great, there's these good things that have happened along the way that have reinforced that, well, maybe this is an okay thing. And when you're stuck in that pattern, you can't see the picture when you're in the frame. I say that so often. When you're in it, you can't see it. And so when I'm talking to clients that are, in relationships, I always ask them the question of, if you were to zoom all the way out and you were to look at the person that you were when you started the relationship and what your morals and values and what your character was like, and you were to be looking in on your relationship as it is right now, would these things that are happening be something that you're okay with? Or has the bar moved somewhere along the way? Because it happens very subtly over the course of time. And somehow the bar starts over here and then it gets moved to way over here. And people don't realize it until they really zoom out and look at, just how far from where they were they've become.
Let me ask this: when you're meeting with someone and it becomes apparent that they're in one of these situations where the spouse or the boyfriend or girlfriend are have narcissistic tendencies, what advice do you give them, and how do you kind of help them break the chain?
So I always tell people, especially people that are stuck in a pattern, look at the facts, because if you're being gaslit, it's really really challenging to question or to really look at, is this reality, or is like what is real and what is not. And so I always tell people, go back to the facts, the things that you've seen or experienced that you know are happening, and take a look at these things and ask yourself, like, did I observe this? And if it's observable or you experienced it or saw it, then those are the facts that you can rely on to make the determination of what's real and what's not.
You know, one of the things I struggle with as a lawyer, and maybe you struggle with this too, is you have people's perception of reality, and if they've been in a bad situation, or they start to see the facts as the other side has painted them, and then you kind of have to get them to go back to reality, or to reevaluate the facts. How do you work on or work with someone to get them to really open their eyes up as to these are the legitimate facts? It's not what you've been gaslit about or what you've been told, but these are the facts. How, I mean, as a therapist, how do you get them to open their eyes and see the facts for what they are?
Yeah, I think that takes some self esteem work. Um, being able to not excuse sometimes other people's behavior and say, well, this happened because of this. No, that happened. And regardless of what else occurred, those things happened. And so just really even sometimes listing out, okay, this is something, and this is something, and those are all independent of whatever else happened. Because people have the autonomy to choose how they react or have the autonomy to choose what their reaction is to any situation or how they behave. And so being able to say these things are independent of all of this other stuff that went on. And they had the ability to choose what they did in those situations. And whether that's, in response to behavior or whether that's whatever the case may be. But just looking at all of that independently and being able to list that out in order to just really zoom out and see black and white because sometimes it just gets so gray in relationships.
You know, one thing I always wonder, and I think it's popular opinion, so I'm going to ask you, someone who's got more experience with this. What I hear is when the narcissist is confronted with facts and the facts don't support the gaslighting and point out the issues with the narcissist, that there's, when I say violent, not necessarily physical, but a very emotional, heated, outburst, from that, and it becomes very hostile. Is that pretty par for the course? Am I right on point or am I off?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, somebody that has true diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder, they don't want to be confronted with anything that's going to be a hit to their ego. So it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to accept feedback or accept accountability and responsibility for the things that are actually true. And so they're going to have a really hard time with whatever they're being confronted with. And sometimes, well, a lot of the time, try to spin it, right? To make it look like, it's not actually how it is. And so firing back with things that, the other partner did or said or whatever is going to support whatever they're looking for in that moment. And so being able to just go back to the black and white, this is a situation at hand, or this is the question I'm asking you, and just keeping it very focused on whatever it is that's being discussed or talked about or the event that happened. Because a lot of times we'll start over here and somehow get way off track on something that, doesn't even necessarily relate to where we started.
Yeah, I think, in our cases, I've seen a lot of, facts are our tools. And, when you present facts to certain people, there's a tendency, I think, that they just can't take accountability.
Mhm.
Yes, like, we all make mistakes. You have to own the mistakes sometimes and just, roll with them. And yeah, I said that, or this is what happened. But I've seen people, who I suspected maybe on the narcissist spectrum there, who just can't say, yeah, I sent that text message, or, can't just take the accountability for it and just say it was a bad day. I shouldn't have done that. And I said that, or, what have you. Like they just can't. And if anything disturbs their narrative factually, it's just that they, it goes to a real dark place pretty fast and very hostile. So if you're going through, this, this one of these relationships and you're in it, should the person who's been with the narcissist, should they start seeking, mental health therapy before the divorce? Should they wait until they're in the middle of the litigation? When do you think is the most appropriate time to kind of get in there and start dealing with some of these perceptions you've have, and some of these chemical reactions in the brain that are that you discussed earlier? When's the best time to start the counseling?
Yesterday, really, I think at any point, if you're even questioning, is this something, that my partner is experiencing, or is this, you know, um, something that I'm going through? Definitely get in with a therapist and start to kind of sort through the weeds of what's going on to determine whether or not that's what's if this is something that you're going through, because a lot of the times we're gonna hear these things, we're gonna see these things all over social media. You know um TikTok therapy is what we call it, when you get those TikTok reels that pop up that tell you all about mental health from somebody who's not qualified to tell you about it. You're going to get misinformation. And that's where, you start to maybe make some um assumptions about something that may not be. And then a lot of the time, you come into therapy, you talk about it, and it validates exactly what's going on, and can help you to be more confident about your situation in any direction. And so, being able to talk with somebody who's qualified to do that and to help you decide, is this somebody with narcissistic personality disorder, or is this just some traits in maybe some unhealthy circumstances that have led to miscommunications, and which, is certainly possible. And those types of things are, you can work through those. If you're in a situation with this repeated narcissistic abuse, really, that's going to be a little bit different. You're going to want to approach that differently. You're not going to, want to jump too quick in any direction. And so being able to just really zoom out, take a look at the bigger picture, and then kind of, decide for yourself how you want to navigate that, is going to be really helpful rather than seeing a reel or hearing a thing and then making an assumption.
Yeah, Facebook and TikTok and Instagram are not replacements. And this podcast, for why it's good for general information, never replaces meeting with a mental health professional or an attorney and really discussing the facts of your case or what you're going through. In my opinion, I think there's a lot of people who, we call it getting your law degree from Google. We ask them, did you get it from Google? Who come in our office with big gaps in knowledge and not accurate information about it. And unfortunately, that can lead you to making some bad decisions legally. And I'm sure it could really affect your mental health if you're using a chat GPT or Google to as your therapist. So as you're going through the process and you're deciding you might want to exit this relationship or take a different approach to it, I know therapy plays a role, but what about emotional support and support from other people and like building a network of people to support you?
Does excuse me, the support system is like the primary component that is going to really determine how someone is able to navigate that, especially if somebody's being gaslit and having a hard time, with their perception of what's real and what's not. So surrounding yourself with trusted people that that are going to be on your team and help you navigate through whatever situations come up, surrounding yourself with people that are knowledgeable, in a therapist that's knowledgeable and experienced with dealing with these types of things. It's going to be really, really fundamental to navigating your way through successfully.
So that's something that you've gone through your therapy, kind of made your decision that this isn't going to work anymore, and you're married and you want to divorce, and you suspect the um, former spouse or soon to be former spouse is a narcissist. Narcissists are known for kind of manipulative behavior, like you've been describing, gaslighting, kind of manipulating the facts or the reality of the situation. What are some common behaviors, that family law attorneys and their clients should be prepared for when you're up against someone who has these tendencies?
What we often see is that somebody's gonna promise you all kinds of change, right? They're gonna, if you approach this person and let them know, this is how I feel, this is what's happening, they might promise change. And somebody with tendencies or traits of narcissistic personality disorder, that might be the case. They might be able to accept the feedback or whatever's going on and make some changes. But true narcissistic personality disorder, it's probably not going to be that way. So truly you're looking at somebody who's gonna promise you the world and then not fulfill any of it. And, that's that gaslighting, right? I'm gonna change, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna go to therapy, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure that this relationship is okay. And then that might stick for a little bit, but that long-term change is going to be very unlikely with someone with true narcissistic, diagnosable narcissistic personality disorder. So, it's that's why the support of people around you that are knowledgeable, that are, going to help you to navigate that is going to be so fundamental because, when you get stuck in that, it's hard not to believe somebody, your partner that maybe you've been with for a long period of time. It's going to be hard to not think the best of them because that's why you're with them. So having people there to support you to say, hey, I want you to look at this. You've given X amount of chances, or you've you've talked about this in the past, and here we are again. And, having people to kind of help pull you back to reality, to give you those facts like we were talking about before, is going to be really helpful to just kind of getting you to the place where you can say, okay, I need to choose. I need to choose me now.
Let me ask you this, and if you feel comfortable answering, like when you're in the courtroom and you're having to confront somebody who has this altered reality that they've done no wrong, criticizing the other spouse, gaslighting this narrative constantly. What recommendations could you make to lawyers when dealing with a person like that to try to break that down or to let the court see the truth and what this person really is?
Yeah, so it's what I would recommend for even a former partner dealing with this type of thing. There's something called the gray rock method that you know, basically what that is just keeping any communication or any interaction with this person very, very neutral. So it's going to be just that, the facts. This is what happened. And when the conversation maybe gets skewed in a direction that is maybe not what is the central focus, is going back to that central focus and stating, this is what I'm asking you, if it's a question, or this is what happened. This is just going back to that point and not letting the conversation get skewed to something that is maybe off topic, because a lot of the times it's going to get redirected to something that's beneficial for that person rather than what's being asked, or what the topic of conversation in that moment. So gray rock method is just keeping things as neutral and focused and factual as possible so that emotions don't get pulled into it, which a lot of the times when former partners are communicating, say about co-parenting or whatever, it's really hard not to go back to that emotional place because it's very easy to get wrapped up in some of the past experiences sometimes. But gray rock method basically is, here's what I'm asking you. I just need an answer to this question, and that's it.
So it kind of sounds to me like if you're on My Family Wizard or Talking Parents, going back to sending the message, the soccer game is at 6. Are you taking them or am I? And just not letting it get into a long, drawn out conversation where it can be pulled. And if
Mhm.
it gets pulled, pull it back. And for practitioners of law, it sounds to me that from your opinion, it's if you're cross examining them or you're confronting them, just the small factual statements on cross examination and jerking them back to those factual statements and not letting them have the ability to really run with the questions and the answers. Let me ask you, when you hold them to the facts, I mean, you hold them to these short conversations or questions which should elicit a short answer. How do they behave normally when they're kind of put into those just the fact situations, yes or no type situation?
Yeah, a lot of the time it's going to be hard to get that straight, short, definitive answer. So you might notice that they try to, navigate away from that, or here's what this person did and that's why this is the case, or whatever it is, to try to make kind of excuse whatever their behavior was, or whatever situation, they're being asked, rather than just get a straight yes or no, which would be the facts. They're trying to figure out some sort of justification for why. So just steering back to that place of yes or no, and just getting back to that black and white, uh, you know, the black and white facts, really.
Find that when the more you hold them to the black and white facts, that they tend to become a little more angry or frustrated or not pleasant.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. A lot of times they get really agitated when you start to approach that, holding them to what the actual behavior was, or what the answer is a lot of times gonna be really frustrating, and they're not gonna know how to deal with that. So you might notice a lot of the times if you steer it back to whatever the question is, there will be some agitation in.
Would it be a fair statement, in your opinion, that when dealing with an individual with these tendencies, to basically keep very good documentation, notes, evidence that could be used later, whether it be in a conversation or if you're going to court, to so you have like this really stellar factual timeline of what transpired and how it came to be, so that you can better control the situation and pull it back to those facts. I mean, that seems to me to be the how the logical takeaway from what you're telling me.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that is going to support whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. You've got the things that happened are going to be, they're going to speak for themselves. And you don't necessarily have to add or take away from it. This is what it was. And being able to allow it to speak or stand on its own and to support whatever it is you're trying to say. So keeping that timeline, keeping all of that documentation, it's going to be really helpful to have that, because that's the story, right? Is allowing those things to tell the story that is being presented. It's going to be the most accurate and representative way of trying to, really depict what kind of character this person has, or if this person is, experiencing narcissistic personality disorder.
It seems it's a way to tell the truth and not let it get spun to inflate somebody's ego or to put you down. Is to just have everything kind of factually documented, whether it be like in a talking parents, text message, and then obviously just keeping meticulous records and documentation so that when that the spin factor comes into play, no, here it is in black and white, or here's the evidence of what the facts really are. In most cases, most family law cases, kids are involved, and it's always the cases I take the most personally. And no kid picks their parents, and no kid picks to have their parents go through something like this. So if you're in a co-parenting relationship with someone who has these narcissistic tendencies, how does that affect the kids and the co-parenting relationship? And what do you see there?
What I see super frequently is that that parent that is experiencing the narcissism is a lot of times not going to think about the best interest of the kids, right? They're going to think of what makes them look like a better parent, even if that's at the expense of the children. How can they look better? How can they fuel their ego? What is it that's going to, present to the outside world that they're a great parent or a great, whatever. So a lot of the times that's, like I said, at the expense of the kids, and not necessarily at what's in their best interest.
What about the relationship between the spouses or former spouses, or when they're trying to co-parent? Is it going to be the person with the narcissistic tendencies constantly putting down the parenting, or how does that work, or what dynamics do you see?
Yeah, I mean, it can be that. Every case is a little bit different, obviously, but there can be a lot of putting down of the other parent. There can be just not taking accountability for whatever's happening, and what, you were late to soccer practice, or you didn't take them to soccer practice. And well, you didn't did this at this time. Just look constantly reflecting back to the other parent instead of taking accountability for whatever it was, and so that's where that gray rock method comes in and is really helpful, is, just going back to just a reminder, practice is at 4. And just, going back to, this is what we're talking about, this is what I'm telling you, and that doesn't have anything to do with this.
Just the facts, like Joe Friday, right? Remember from the police shows, just the facts. Well, it sounds like being in one of these relationships, can cause a lot of trauma, whether it be to the partner or to the children. Can you tell us about you find yourself in one of these relationships and you decide that, hey, this relationship isn't for me anymore. Can you kind of walk us through the healing process and what's involved in that, and trying to get yourself back into a good mental state following a relationship like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest part is going to be just rebuilding that sense of self. A lot of times, like I was saying earlier on, that person is going to chip away at someone's self-esteem, and it's going to make it really, really challenging for them to see their self-worth outside of that relationship, and see, who they are as an individual, rather than, a component of that relationship. And so it's going to start by reminding them what you're experiencing was reality, and empowering them to be able to distinguish what's actually happening versus, when things get spun back, the perception that's being presented to them. So, that's going to be something that sometimes takes a little bit of time to rebuild, of course, because, it's been chipped away at slowly. And that's why I encourage people to zoom out and say, before the relationship, where did you stand on this subject? Okay, this is where you are now. That's a pretty far gap in between those two things. And so, reminding them that they had a sense of self before the relationship, and then getting them back to that, as they exit the relationship.
Yeah, I think you touched on something though. It took years of chiseling day by day to get you to that point, and you have to, we willing to put in the time and have the discipline to pick up the pieces and basically put them back together. And it's not maybe something that's going to be done overnight.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to take it's going to take time. Healing takes time, and it's not linear. There's going to be times where you feel like you're back at square one. And that's okay. That's really actually pretty normal. And it's okay to even grieve that relationship. There were good parts. Whenever that chiseling happens, it's obviously very slow, right? It's over the course of time, and it's not noticeable. And so, if it was noticeable, that person wouldn't have stayed in the relationship. If it was something that was generally pretty egregious, they would have left that relationship a long time ago. But that slow chiseling is what makes it so that they stay in that relationship. It's these small things that happen over the course of time where it's like, well, maybe that's excusable, or maybe, they're let me back up. Narcissists generally don't apologize. If they had an apology, maybe that's something that it could suffice for that. And so, going back to kind of that the beginning of, is this something that you were okay with before the relationship, and now you're over here? It's that good reminder of who they were, and getting back to that sense of self. But it does take, it takes tremendous effort, it takes time, and being able to be to really put in the work of identifying that these perceptions have been skewed and a lot of times manipulated. And it was these, dopamine, oxytocin cocktails that made you stay, and these good things that happened along the way, because obviously, it's that's why they stayed in the relationship. And there were good times, but that doesn't mean the relationship was good.
I think you hit on something just a second ago when you kind of slipped out of your mouth that narcissists don't apologize. Tell us about that for a minute. I find that pretty interesting.
Yeah, generally speaking, they're not going to take accountability, right? They're not going to say, I'm sorry that my action hurt you. It's going to be something where the next day you're going to go to bed and wake up, and I hear this one all the time. You're going to go to bed and wake up, and it's like it didn't happen. And there's never any resolution to whatever it was that occurred. And so that, I hear that time and time again is, there was no conversation and resolution to the problem, and so that resentment just builds and builds and builds until at some point there's this, a lot of times, explosion of emotion, and that person is finally done with whatever the relationship is, because they've never had any resolution to these little things that have happened over the course of probably many years.
Now, one thing I was going to ask about was obviously you hear it, the words thrown out there, the narcissism. What's the cause of it? Is it usually something that develops younger in life, like when you're a kid? Is it something that develops over time? Can you tell us about that?
I don't know that there's a real definitive answer of this is what causes narcissism, but there's been some research that support that childhood trauma does. So, that's a decent indicator. But there's a lot of argument as far as, in the clinical community of how this all occurs. And so, there's no real definitive answer, and there's not necessarily, a treatment that is the gold star treatment that's going to cure it. There's not a medication you can take, to cure it either. So it's going to be, really just cognitive work that somebody puts in to have recognition of, this is something that I see that I'm doing, and they're going to have to be very, very strong willed in that, because they're going to have to face some really difficult truths and realities along the way.
We were talking about, we kept hitting the vein that, people who have narcissistic characteristics don't like to take accountability. Do you see people who have narcissistic tendencies actually go to therapy and admit that I need help?
From time to time, you'll get one every once in a while, but a lot of times couples specifically will come in, and when they're presented with the facts from an outside perspective, it's going to be something that is A lot of times they won't want to come back to therapy for subsequent sessions because now they're having somebody else tell them that these are the things that are happening and they're not okay. And there's not the capability to manipulate as much as say with their partner. And a lot of the times partners are going to be kind of manipulated over the course of time through that gaslighting or whatever tactic they're using, whether it's conscious or not. There's a lot of manipulation that occurs that gets them to potentially excuse or just kind of continue on without any accountability for that partner.
Katie, as we kind of get close to wrapping up here, I just wanted to ask you, are there any resources, books, or materials out there that you would recommend for people who are maybe finding themselves in this situation and looking to get more information?
Yeah, so there's a really, if you're to look up the gray rock method, I find that to be the most helpful. But Talking Parents actually has quite a few articles specifically for co-parents, and sometimes they even have workshops that they do where you can, or webinars, I think is what it is, where you can go on and you can register, and it helps to get maybe up-to-date information or resources about how to navigate co-parenting with a narcissist or how to communicate with a narcissist or whatever the case may be. There's a bunch of different articles that are sometimes really helpful helping your child be resilient when co-parenting with a narcissist. That's another one I think I saw recently. But Talking Parents is a great resource. And then just really looking up the gray rock method. I think communicating using that method is going to be the most helpful.
Do you recommend or think it's productive to use like our family wizard and my talking parents when you're dealing with somebody who has these tendencies?
100%. Those things you're going to be able to keep it all right there in one spot. And it allows you to, save, save things that are factual and have it all in one spot. And, it's all right there.
Talking about that, it reminds me of one case I litigated where the person would start a string or, a communication and our family wizard, and the person would go back and do what you were doing and go back to the facts. I'm not asking about this. I just want you to know that practice is at 6 and you confirming you're picking up, or they would literally start a new string in there, a new message, and just keep starting strings to the point where it was almost very difficult to figure out who was talking about what to try to defeat it. So I do think that, that's something I've noticed, like on the extreme level of I'll just start a whole new conversation about what I want to talk about, or just let this one die because you keep going back to the facts. But I thought that was pretty interesting and probably a really good explanation now of what's going on in that case I was litigating years ago.
Mhm.
I was unaware of what really was the driving force behind that communication pattern. So as we wrap up, I want to thank you again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you on, and it's always interesting to learn something new that might help people. The whole point of the podcast is to help people who are going through a family law case or might be on the verge of going through one, and trying to get them some more factual information from people who work in the field, or if there are attorneys out there who are wanting information, about what narcissism is, or the topics we cover. The best thing any of you guys can do out there who are listening to help us to get the information out there is to like, subscribe, share, so that the people in the community can get a hold of this information, and like-minded people can benefit from it. So we always encourage that. I think we're knocking on the door of about 5,000 subscribers to the YouTube channel. But please help us, get the information out there to people who need it. And Katie, if anybody out there wants to get in touch with you, is going through something like this, or thinks that they might need to discuss some mental health issues with you related to this, how do they get in contact with you?
So they can visit our website, which is www.therapyroomflorida.com, or they can give us a call at
Well, Katie, like I told you, 45 minutes would go fast. I think we actually went well over that, but we will definitely have you on again because these topics are never ending, and there's always new scenarios and information to get out there to people. And we appreciate you giving us your time on this busy day, and we'll have you back on soon. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.